All right, hi. As John said, I'm Katie Hill. I'm an entrepreneur in residence at the Entrepreneur Center, one of the sponsors of today's event. And I am so thrilled and honored to be here today with Brian Powell of Tangram Flex. I believe there is no question that Tangram Flex is one of the most exciting companies in the Dayton region and quite possibly the Midwest. They are, we're going to get into it in a few minutes, but they are revolutionizing the way that software development happens. And so
we're trying to, right?
Yeah, it's not a small problem that you're attacking, but it's super exciting. So with that, I have some questions for Brian that I would like to sort of help, allow him to tell the Tangram story to the lovely Dayton community that we have here with us today. But before we get into the company, I kind of wanted to talk more about Brian himself as an entrepreneurial leader and the path that kind of got him to this point. So I want to start with that piece, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritties of Tangram here in a few minutes. So with that, would you tell us a little bit about your background and sort of how your career has evolved and what brought you to Tangram?
Sure. So I grew up down in Cincinnati in Norwood. Went through Norwood High School. Went to college in St. Louis at Washington University in St. Louis. From there, I graduated, went into the corporate world. Quickly found that was not for me. I craved the flexibility and the ownership that the startup world sort of gives founders. So founded my own company doing content management systems before WordPress gobbled up a third of the internet and basically runs everything, every website out there. Sold the technology out of that company to start a widget company, if you remember desktop widgets and gadgets on your computer. And really we founded that company on the idea around alerts and campuses, because the Virginia Tech shooting had happened right about that time. And the text messaging at the time was taking 3 hours to get out like instant alerts to people. So the ability for people to have something on their desktop that could alert them. And so we fed the content management system into that sort of application. And actually all of the desktop and widget and gadget platforms turned into the interactive television platforms that you see now on Samsung, LG, Vizio. And so, we were sort of in the right place, right time with a full content management system. And we wrote about 150 different applications for people, AT&T, NBA. We did parts of Vimeo, YouTube, etc. And couldn't sell that company due to a bad angel investor deal. And so that was, it was heartbreaking, like most startup stories are. From there, I got the opportunity to join a company based out of Portland, Oregon, and came in as their director of engineering. And by the time I left, I was sort of leading their engineering team across 2 locations, and actually brought an office here to Dayton. We were in the Oregon district right across from Blind Bob's, which was always interesting to bring our executive team in, because you never knew what was going to be on the billboard in the shop across the street. So. But that was a good time. Actually, the first person that I brought to Tangram, John Weiss, was my second hire when I opened up the Dayton office here. And when I had the opportunity to come and build another company in Dayton, John was the first person that I called. But anyway, did that company for a while. Spent a lot of time away from actual development and implementation, sort of doing managerial, pieces of it, and decided that I needed to get back into building an actual company. That company was sort of, had been in existence for about a dozen years and was sort of static. So from there I went down to a company that came out of the brandery called Strap, and we were doing wearable and fitness data and exposing it in an easy to use manner for like Starbucks and Procter & Gamble to sort of, reward people for activity. And actually those sorts of programs are really prevalent now, but they weren't at the time, and we were maybe a little too early. We ran out of cash and moved over to a company called Complete Set, which was it had done an angel round out of Louisville, an accelerator down there. And actually, when I joined, it had just been accepted to Techstars Chicago. And so they were going through there. I joined them as their CTO to sort of come in and rebuild stuff. And actually, two of the developers with Complete Set are actually working with Tangram now. And so it's been, sort of a twisted, winding path to Tangram. But I was actually talking with Aaron Miller from Galois, our parent company, there you go, about Tangram September of 2017. And at that point, they had sort of said, hey, this is a Q3 2018 sort of company, but let's keep the conversation going. And Complete Set ran out of money beginning of January 2018. You're sensing a theme here, right? And we decided, I sort of called and I said, hey, that conversation we were talking about having in Q3, I'm available to have that conversation now. And so got on a plane to Portland, Oregon, oddly enough, 2 blocks away from the office that I visited in the interactive television company that I was with, where I had an office here. And interview went great. I loved the parent company, their approach to what they were doing, and what Tangram was trying to do, which was make all of the sort of cyber physical systems, which means the systems that humans touch, right? Like the things that we interact with, our cars, our medical devices, all of those things, safer to use. And by safe, it's not just safety, but it's also correctness. Implementing the software that's in there in a manner that you can test it and that it's correct and it's secure. And that's kind of where I started with Tangram. And that was, I joined in February of 2018, and now we're at 32 people. And we're through our Series A, which happened in December.
That's awesome. I think one of the cool things about Startup Week is that these kinds of programs expose themes in entrepreneurship that we can learn from and that we might be able to relate to. And I think your winding path thing is definitely a common theme among entrepreneurs, that it's never a straight line to like the most obvious, most exciting startup in the world. But one of my questions about that path is that, so you've had the opportunity to identify different opportunities, and some have taken off more than others, and that's totally natural. But like, what is it that draws you to a particular project or startup or technology?
I've sort of gotten out of the driver's seat of trying to dream up the crazy idea. I actually enjoy the engagement and mentorship that sort of comes in building a team and building a product and a company. I advise for Techstars and the Brandery and Uptech, and work with a lot of companies that have gone through those programs and still engage with them. And the process of building a company, something from nothing, is addictive. It's highly addictive. Regardless of whether it crashes and burns, sometimes the more glorious that it crashes and burns, the more fun it is. For me, I think it's maybe a personal flaw of just wanting to get into these sorts of situations where you're building something and you don't know if it's going to take off or it's going to catch, but you sort of see that little glimmer of like hope of like, yeah, if this thing goes, it's going to go really big. And it's not sometimes it's not always the best solution wins. Sometimes it just you'll get beat by another solution that the sales and marketing is just better on.
Or the timing.
Or the timing. Or the timing. Yep.
Okay, so a little bit more on the personal side. So then you have had these opportunities to sort of take risks. You have a family, so you have to sort of balance that. Can you talk a little bit about your family and how they support you in this?
Sure, yeah, my wife's an angel. So she...
Set that one up, slammed up.
Yeah, thank you. She has kept the steady job, actually, while I sort of built companies. But we have 3 kids together, and a gigantic dog. He just keeps getting bigger. I don't know how we're going to stop feeding him, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's, the startup life of needing to sort of, put in 100 and more percent, and balance family life. I don't necessarily think that there is that balance. It's sort of all on one side or the other when you're sort of doing this sort of thing.
That was one of my questions, was what about balance? What do you do for fun?
I golf a lot, actually, and I enjoy that. Running around with my kids is great. I found that you just have to make time for it because, the last thing that you want is to burn out because, if you're inside of an organization and you're going so hard and you burn out, you've got other people that are depending on you not to burn out, and so. You can't expect them to drive so hard that they're burning out, and you yourself can't drive so hard that you're burning out because, there's always ups and downs, but you try to minimize the downs, and burnouts, take a while to bounce back from. So.
Great point. Okay, so you teased us a little bit about what Tangram is, but can you go ahead and sort of tell us what Tangram is, what it does, how it works?
Sure, yeah.
And the problems you're solving?
So Tangram, Galois spun us out after a few. Do
you guys know what Galois is? That it's a R&D organization?
Yeah, Galois. So our parent company is an R&D organization. They have an office headquartered in Portland, Oregon. They have an office here in Dayton, atop of 444, and then they have a Washington D.C. office as well. They're largely a research organization. They do a lot of research and development, a lot more research than than true development. It's a lot. I mean, really, it's a bunch of recovering academics. I guarantee I'm the dumbest person in the room when we walk in there, no questions asked. So you just sort of swallow that pill and go with it. But they had executed on a ton of research in the space of sort of assuring that very complex systems are safe. And, back to the safe, I mean, they have security properties, they're built correctly. And how do you reason that something is built correctly? And so they had been doing a bunch of research, and we're the fifth spin out from Galois. This isn't their first time sort of pushing a company out. But the way that they do it is they sort of realize that, hey, there's a revenue stream here in all this research that we've done. And Galois, as a research organization, is not a product, company. It's a very different structure than how you would build a product company. And so that need to protect the Galois sort of culture, right, requires them to take these business opportunities and sort of position them on their own. And so when I came in, I would sort of taken on the task of, all right, what is this? You've done all this research. How do we piece this together into a product and start to organize it? And so it probably took about 6-7 months before we really got to a point where we were like, yeah, we know what we're building here, right? Because it was sort of feeling out the market and the need. And Galois has been just absolutely amazing to us. It's kind of like living in your parents' house with their credit card while you're figuring out what you want to do with life. And so the opportunities and the introductions and the contracts and the work that Galois set us up with really positioned us to be successful as long as we sort of continued down the path of making sure that we were building the business responsibly.
So what exactly does Tangram do?
Yeah, so Tangram is a platform that's it's a SaaS-based platform that's built to allow companies that build these very complex systems. And by complex systems, think DoD systems, energy utility systems, healthcare. They're building devices or even automotive. A Tesla is basically a driving computer, right? How do you reason and know that all of the different software that's been put into that is all working together correctly? And so Tangram is built as a solution, as you have GitHub for maybe code management. Tangram is built to sort of manage and organize all of these Lego blocks that you build these products with, and then help you understand, that the implementation of those pieces meets the desired outcomes, and they aren't going to do something. It helps you reason about the behavior of the software. And so we're in the early phases. Actually, we're getting ready to launch the first real sort of usable version of the product in July. The team's been working really hard. But with that product, you'll have the capability to start to reason and version all of the different Lego blocks that you have in your software kit and combine them in different manners that allows you to build and manage really complex embedded systems.
So can you sort of explain to us the world we live in now, the pre-Tangram world, and like what some of the gaps are that are problematic?
Yeah, this is really hard to do without going like doom and gloom, because all of the examples of like what Tangram would help with are all like people have died, sort of examples. But the Boeing Max example, the Prius unintended acceleration, those sorts of issues are software flaws where they didn't reason about the behaviors of the software or put in check protections to make sure that the software wouldn't go into unpredictable states. And Tangram is trying. We're going to take the best attempt that we can. We sort of, we talk about it internally as sort of a moral imperative that all the developers and the people who surround the company are, we're actually trying to make these systems that are rapidly advancing. Like if you think, about all the autonomy that's going into cars. I was in a car not too recently that had like active lane assist, and I'm like, no, I am trying to change a lane here, and I'm wrestling with this car, right? Those sorts of things, there's software developers behind them, and they're making decisions. That's what we pay software developers to do, is to make decisions when they're writing code. And so how do you check that those decisions are the correct implementation of the desired outcome? In the 1500s and 1600s, we built a lot of buildings, and a lot of them fell down because material science and architecture and physics were still sort of coming about. The tools were being built. And if you think about software, we're still in the beginning parts of modern software. And so we need to focus on the tools that we use to build software, not just source control and how can we deploy cloud infrastructures really quickly, but how do we know that the systems that we're building are safe? Just the same way that you would, that this building was built by someone who, spent a lot of time crunching the numbers to make sure that the materials they were using and, the structural support that they had was correct, and, it was constructed in a way that made sense.
Are you guys following? This is amazing stuff here, right? It's not just another software solution. They're like fundamentally changing the way in which software is built. And as we become increasingly dependent, slaves basically to our technology, this is like really big. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. It's so exciting. Could you give us a couple more customer examples of like, so we talked about the Boeing thing, very, very tragic. Automotive. Mm-hmm. What other kinds of things? Who else needs this?
On the security side of things, nobody, to my knowledge, has exploited them, but, they'll do the hacker days, and, people can hack into pacemakers and, insulin pumps and all of those sorts of things, right, that you think are, well, it's this little device, but like someone's life is depending on that. Like, how do we reason that piece, the software, not just the hardware or the actual equipment, but the software that somebody wrote is correct inside of that device? So, we have examples all over the place, whether it's automotive. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's like 15 million lines of code on a Ford F-150. And you're going to tell me that every single line of that is correct and safe and ready to go. And I'm not saying that we're going to fix every problem in there, but what we can try to do is try to identify them early in the engineering process before cars need to be updated and recalled and those sorts of things. Yeah, so, yeah.
Okay, so Tangram came out of Galois, which is an R&D organization. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between an R&D organization and then a startup, and sort of what that transition has been like for your organization?
Sure, yeah. Rob Wiltbank, the CEO of Galois, luckily is a sort of venture capitalist. He comes from teaching entrepreneurship, so he is overly patient with the startups that that come out of Galois. But as a research organization, a research organization is out to prove that things are possible, right? And proving that things are possible doesn't mean that it works in every scenario, under every environment, circumstance, etc. Whereas a product company, we build a product and we hand it to a customer. The customer doesn't care that it was a prototype or whatever. They're buying something, or buying a service. And so what we find ourselves in a relationship with our parent company is that they'll have a lot of really smart people building something, and then we'll need to take sort of the idea and the themes and the research that's been done and sort of inherit it and then modify it so that it works in a production sort of environment where it's scalable. We think about things like scalability, fault tolerance, and a lot of the times the research prototypes are built to say, okay, it works on this machine, you take it off this machine, we can't account for it, and that doesn't work when you're a product company that is basing your reputation. We're sort of caught here, right? Because we're a company that's selling software quality, and so we can't ship software that doesn't have quality, inside of it. So we have to really make sure that we're putting out the best product that we possibly can.
Okay, so what has life been like at Tangram for the last 9-12 months as you've been getting this thing out to, bringing it out to market, and what are your strategies to scale this business?
Well, crazy is the initial word. I think there was a period of time there where we had 1 to 2 people starting every 2 weeks. So we were in a constant state of delegation and, bringing people on board and getting set up and doing those things. We moved into we were in Galois' office, which was set up for 10 Galwegians is what they call them, 10 Galois employees. And we had 3 Galois employees in there, plus I think 16 Tangram employees. So we were pretty much like bursting at the gills. 2 weeks before we moved, I was just sitting at one of the lunch tables with my computer because I was always in meetings, so I didn't really, need a desk per se. But then we moved over to 607, right next door here, to Jason Woodard's new building, and we took the 5th floor of that. So.
How many desks do you have there now?
We can hold 40 right now, but capacity at the space is 60. So. It gave us a little bit of breathing room. At one point we had Ricky and a set of his team down in one of the conference rooms in 444. So it was, it's great to bring the team back together.
Yeah, if anybody was at 444 and you saw the papered room, that was kind of the makeshift executive office, right? Just stuck some
and we just kept
printer
shoving
paper
people
over the
in
windows.
There. So yeah, it was, felt bad.
But so that's kind of the wild times, right? In a startup where you got new people, folks coming in every day, and you're just kind of making it work. How'd the team do? What was that like? And
we're blessed with a team that most of them have come from startups or been involved in startups. The team ranges from Ricky Peters, who, Doug Ebersol, right, big DOD, personalities and names, and all the way, down to, people who are just in the Startup Cincinnati community that, are commuting up to Dayton to work at Tangram. And everybody sort of rolls with the punches, but I think, at the core, everybody just knows that we're after something, big, and I think the team does a really good job of rolling with the punches and sort of does day by day.
Can you talk a little bit about recruiting, what that experience has been like, getting people to come to Dayton and what they're finding here? And
yeah, I mean, recruiting's actually been kind of, I don't want to say easy, it's never easy, right? But we've been surprised. We actually engaged external recruiters with the expectation that was like, we gotta source talent, and we were pretty blessed that the initial sort of influx of members that we had networks that we could leverage, and so a lot more word of mouth of bringing people into Tangram was sort of our path for it. But it's kind of this, Dayton's this kind of weird area, right? Because there's actually a ton of engineering talent in Dayton. It's just all on base, and nobody can talk about what they're doing. So, so when
I mean, I think that's an important message, because we
Yeah.
do get sort of hammered sometimes about talent, but the fact is, like, we've got really, really smart, talented people here that just, if they told you how talented they are, they'd have to kill you or whatever, So, like, I'm glad that you guys are finding that.
Absolutely. I mean, and we're definitely, we're blessed that, we have a culture and an environment that is attractive to engineering talent that is looking to, maybe make a change or, to work on something meaningful. And so, I think we would struggle if we were trying to reinvent Uber or, something along those lines. Not that the talent doesn't exist here, but I think that the environment of Dayton and the space, the embedded area that we play in, the embedded systems area, the Dayton area is ripe with that sort of talent.
So you just mentioned culture. Can you talk a little bit about Tangram's culture, and maybe also your experience with various startups and like how that impacts your ability to lead and drive culture today?
So Tangram's culture is, I don't know, it's kind of like this unicorn. We do a lot to really protect the culture. Our interview process is actually pretty remarkable at protecting the culture. I think it's, engineering fit. We're not even engaged if engineers don't already have the talent, right? But, the ability for us to sort of dive deep into, is this person going to be a cultural fit, is something that we really spend a lot of time on. But the other startups that I've been with, a lot of them have sort of struggled with sort of the mission, the objective. They were maybe chasing cash for the sake of cash, and with Tangram, we're able to really be laser focused on an end goal, and it's coming up. The first version is going to ship, and so with us, that's the team's excited about that.
So what are some of those characteristics that you look for in the folks that you hire? And what are like the cultural values that you're trying to maintain and promote?
Yeah, so on the cultural value side of things, the team is remarkable at having open, honest conversations, to the point of like, you'll walk away and you'll be like, wow, that was a heated conversation. And it's like, everybody's still friends. It's never personal. We're always after the best solution. And I think that comes from just people's backgrounds. They've been in environments where the politics have been a pain, or, the politics have kept the organization from moving forward. And I think as a team, we're just so laser focused on making sure that, everybody's aligned to what we're doing. And so, trust is a big aspect of it. We do a lot of learning. So, whenever we send someone to a conference, or, they engage with a customer, or maybe it's just based on their experience. We had one of our leads do a lunch and learn, is what we do, and do a lunch and learn on sort of how the DoD buys software, because it's important that the team understands sort of the environment that our product is going to go, the cycle that our product is going to go through, not just our product manager or our CEO or our capture team, but the entire team understands like, okay, this is the steps that we're going to need to go through as an organization. So really driving learning is a major piece, and then just being adapting, right? The plan is the plan today until we get a new piece of information, and then guess what? The plan's probably changing, and how do you stay sort of oriented to where we need to go? We say a lot that we know we're going west. We know the first stop is Indianapolis, but we don't know if we're going to Denver or we're going to St. Louis, right? So we just know we're headed in a west direction, and we may end up in Seattle and we may end up in San Diego. We don't know, but we know that going west. And I feel like one of the things that startups will struggle with is they're so focused on the end state that adapting throughout the process of sort of building a product and listening to what the market's telling you and customer feedback driving things. That's one of the things that, to go back to the earlier question about other startups, I think, the companies that I've been with have struggled to listen to what the market is telling them. And, they sort of started with a maybe founder's vision of we're going to go build just this. And it's like, well, there's like 2 people who want that, but if we go over here, there's like 1,000 people. Maybe we should go to the 1,000 people. And that's always an interesting sort of struggle, I guess.
Yeah, it's good to have a plan, but like there's also a lot of power in some of the ambiguity or the ability to adjust, right? That's amazing. Okay, so one of the things you mentioned a little bit earlier, which I think sort of sets Tangram apart, is you guys just did some successful fundraising. I think it's a high watermark for our region. I think there's some good data around it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can, yeah. So we raised $4.5 million it was a little over $22 million valuation from Hale Capital in New York City. Based on the feedback that we got from Centrifuge out of Cincinnati, based on PitchBook data, it was the largest Series A in the state, largest and fastest Series A in the state of Ohio, and the second or third largest. It would be the largest if you took out biomedical in the Midwest. So, and unlike some other Series A's that I've been a part of, one investor came in and took the entire round. It wasn't a cobbled together, sort of thing. Hale Capital is very successful in the area that they invest, and we were fortunate enough to have them really take interest in what we were doing, in the mission, and give us the resources that we need to bring Tangram to market.
And so the use of funds, what are you going to do with all that money?
We are using those funds to make strategic bets. They are not funds that we need to operate as an organization, which is part of, I think, the uniqueness of Galois spinning off Tangram is that, we had a revenue stream attached to us when we sort of, when Galois let us sort of spun us out when I started, and from day one we were in the black, which, even my own businesses, I don't know if I can say that you started in the black from the get-go. So, it was a unique sort of period of time with Hale. When we were talking about their investment and what it meant and what we would use it for. And really that's centered around, as we got the product in hand and we were ready to really go to market with it, what are the strategic bets that we need to make to go to market in a way that was meaningful? And that's really where Hale was interested in sort of helping us out.
So you have a sustainable business.
We do.
And then you have this injection of capital to help you sort of attack certain areas that are particularly exciting.
It's all for sort of the strategic positioning and direction of the organization, so that, you know, when we identify, okay, hey, here's the market that we're really going to go after, you know, we don't need to go raise money to go do that. It's done in conjunction with the investors sort of helping us through that.
So what is your vision for Tangram, and like what do you see as those major future opportunities?
Let's get the product out the door first.
Okay, all right, we'll start there.
I think the major opportunity for Tangram really centers around, you know, regardless of market, right? You know, getting developers and or engineering teams used to sort of our approach to things. With that said, we tried to build the product in such a way that we're not walking into meetings telling engineering teams that their engineering process is flawed and dumb and stupid. I feel like that would be a very short meeting that would get us shown the door in a hurry. You know, rather to build something that can come alongside an engineering process and immediately hook into it and start to provide value for it. So I think, you know, in sort of short to maybe mid long term is getting those examples of actually making an impact on the safety and correctness of systems in a way that is that's manageable and can be communicated. The other side of that is the long-term piece of it, which is, you know, whether we find a acquirer, which I think that there are definitely companies that are interested in something like Tangram, whether for their own purposes or to sort of keep it out there in the market. We're hoping that we find enough client revenue to make it something that they would keep out there in the market. It would, but the other side of, you know, the long term would be, you know, IPO or something along those lines. But I mean, we're talking way off in the distance. Let's just get the product in customers' hands, start that feedback cycle, and then start adapting it to the process that we see.
It's awesome. You hit on one of the probably a challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs face, I think, in terms of bringing something to market, about getting people to change their ways and try your product for the first time. And you guys are doing that like on a, I mean, you're really probably in some ways pose a threat to the old way of doing things. And so how do you overcome that?
I think we're still tackling that problem. I don't know if we have a rock solid answer for that. I think the way that the team has approached it so far is that the solution can't be a stop doing what you're doing and start doing it our way sort of deal. It sort of has to plug in and provide value. You know, there's a book called Crossing the Chasm, which is on its third version now. But it talks about, you know, you'll get your, you know, sort of innovators and your early adopters, but to get to mainstream market, there's this gigantic gap. And, you know, the market that we're going after is sort of an interesting one, because on one side, there are engineers that are, you know, always, you know, interested in new technology that's coming out, et cetera. But organizationally, you're talking about processes that some of these organizations pride themselves on, right? Like, to modify the way that Lockheed Martin builds aircraft would just be like, whoa, you know, like that would be crazy. So how do you, you know, how do you catch those forward-leaning people in a manner that isn't stop doing, you know, what you're doing, and they don't, you know, they don't become the rebel or the rogue person that's out running with something new, but rather, you know, be that solution that's, oh, well, Tangram can help you with that, right? And just be additive in the way and help sort of own the narrative and the evolution of people thinking through how these systems are built.
Okay, any final thoughts? And then we'll open up for some questions. Okay, thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions for Brian? We got one in the back.
How do you monitor competitive landscape? Like, the day before you launch, all of a sudden you say, X, Y, Z, hit the market first.
Sure. You know, there are there are solutions that are out in the market that are already sort of playing in this space. They're actually solutions that are have been products that have evolved, So while we are tracking and looking to understand the value that those products bring, so that we can message against them, where we think we're in a sort of competitive advantage, and we know that players are coming after us. I mean, we're not foolish to think, hey, we're the only ones that are ever going to do this. But we think based on what we're hearing from the market and from what we know about competitive products, we're about 2 to 3 years ahead. Now, that would be a horrible lead to waste. And so, in order for us to protect it, the goal is to engage with customers. And in fact, right now, a lot of our sort of biz dev and capture process has just been focused on understanding customer problems and sort of what we can identify and how we can plug in. Because I think that the only way that you really protect that sort of lead is by providing value and becoming an organization that is focused on being consultative and less maybe about selling a product and more about being, a team that's there to help with the situation. Hopefully that answered your question.
Very good. Real quick, how do you keep your key employees from being exposed?
Well, I hope they wouldn't leave. We're very fortunate that we're able to take care of our employees. One of the things that I think we do very well as an organization is delegate ownership. So I think the bulk of the organization owns a piece of the success of Tangram. It's not something where people are showing up just to sort of punch the clock and but take care of them through both benefits, working environment, culture. But also make sure that they feel ownership in the overall success of the organization. Yeah. Yeah.
I went through this course at Ohio State with a local project on business development, and they were talking about making your product like a morphine. Oh, thank you. Like a morphine, like the customer needs it and so forth. But my experience in the product development world and with technology is that the stakeholders that you're trying to sell to have a very high tolerance for risk. And they'd rather ship something that's not been tested, ship something that's not been vetted fully, that might have blended risks and they don't really want to hear about the result. So you're doing the good thing. But they don't really want to hear about it. In fact, the engineers are telling them that there's risks, and they're saying, ship it.
Correct. Yeah.
So So do you have a customer actually that's willing to pay for this yet? Or is it possible that your real customer might be an insurance company?
I'm not disagreeing with the insurance company approach. In fact, there's a good company out of Cincinnati that I advise called iReport Source that is solely focused at sort of workers' comp and automating that process. And they quickly found that selling to businesses wasn't where they should go. They should go to the insurance companies and then sell through them. The piece that, I'm with you, right? The Boeing Max, we quickly found out was because, you had management trying to hit numbers, right? And so the way that we're trying to come about that is less about sort of cover your ass sort of approach and more of, just keep doing the process that you're doing and let us prove that by hooking into that process, we can start to generate data that starts to affect things. The issue with where you see a lot of the ship it fast is because when you go through that systems engineering cycle, the V, right? The testing and verification is way at the end. And so they've blown through budgets and implementation, they've blown it through in design and integration, and then they get the testing and they're like, oh, we've got 2 weeks left till we ship this thing. But what they aren't doing through that entire process is using tools that are generating the evidence that the system that they're building complies during that entire process. That's all sort of saved to the end. And so the message that we're coming sort of with is, these tools, and we're not claiming to build all of them. In fact, there's a lot of really great tools that are out there that are available. What we're interested in is actually orchestrating those tools in a manner that that provides feedback to the organization, not at the 11th hour before they need to get it out, but at the very beginning. They start to write requirements and they start to design system models. How do you check that all of that is in line before you even get to implementation? And then how do you reuse pieces that have already been built correctly in a manner that the integration doesn't cause problems?
Any other questions? Okay, well, you heard it here first at Startup Week in Dayton 2019 about Tangram Flex. So I guess enjoy the rest of the evening, huh, John?
Sounds good. Thank you, Katie.
Okay.